Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tyler Barker. I am the coordinator within the Office of Parent and Family Programs here at Georgia Tech. I would like to welcome you to our What Buzzin at webinar series for all parents and families at Georgia Tech. Today we have some very special guests attending our webinar, some very high profile people at the Institute to kind of help and talk about supporting your student, especially if they're in their first or second year, and what student success looks like at Georgia Tech. If you have any questions for our panelists here today, and they will introduce themselves in a moment, please feel free to utilize the Q&A chat box. Once again, if you have any questions, please feel free to utilize the Q&A chat box. That is where we can connect with you and kind of answer some of your questions and kind of just see what's going on with your student and how we can best assist you. If you'll give me one moment, I will transition over to our intro slideshow deck. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator for today, Dr. Stephen Girardot.
Thank you very much, Tyler, and I want to welcome all of our parents and family members this afternoon. As Tyler said, I'm Stephen Girardot. I'm the Associate Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education here at Georgia Tech and a proud alumnus. For those of you that came through Facet this last summer or summers before, you may have joined our faculty panel where we talked about preparing students to join Georgia Tech. And now here we are around the midterm point of the semester. And I'm joined with by several administrators and faculty members who work closely or teach first-year students and undergraduates as well to talk a little bit about how things are going and also just to answer your questions pertaining to academic success and academic support and the classroom environment. I'm going to have each of the panelists briefly introduce themselves, tell you what their role at Georgia Tech is, and for those that teach, what courses they teach, and then offer a couple of points from their perspective, and then we'll go into the Q&A for the majority of the session. So again, I hope everybody's healthy and safe, and we're glad to have you here this afternoon. And I'm going to start with our first panelist, Dean Stein.
Good afternoon. It's great to see, I can't see you, but it's great that you're all here. I appreciate it. The Dean of Students Office is working with students and the Division of Student Life is fully functional. We have all kinds of support services in place for students in terms of counseling and meeting with dean's appointments and stuff. We're assisting students who need to get messages to their faculty that they've missed class for whatever reason. Or need some additional time with an assignment due to something going on in their life. So I want to reassure you that we are here. We're getting referrals from faculty of concern, and we're addressing those, having conversations with students, and we're also hearing from you as family members in terms of some of the worries and concerns that you have in trying to assist your student in being successful here at Tech.
Thank you, Dean Stein. Next is Dr. Beth Spencer, who's Director of Undergraduate Advising and Transition here.
Hi, everyone. So in my office, we work with the academic advisors across the entire campus. Advising is very decentralized at Georgia Tech, as you probably know. The advising is actually done by students' major departments. My office helps to coordinate services across all of these departments. We also have in my specific unit our exploratory advising. We offer academic coaching, which is available to all students to help students work on academic strategies and general success. And we also house GT 1000 and 2000, which hopefully most of our first year students are taking this semester. And then today, although we have a brand new Director of Tutoring Academic Support, I can help with any questions about that because I've worked closely with that unit for the last year. And oh, let's see, this semester I'm teaching a history course. Ironically, it's the history of disease and medicine. I'm teaching in a hybrid format, so it's been an interesting but a rewarding experience so far. And in the past, I often teach GT 1000 or some of our other success seminars.
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. Next is Dr. Carrie Shepler in the School of Chemistry and Biochemistry. Dr. Shepler is the Director of Instructional Activities and Student Experiences.
Thanks. If you're wondering what that title means, it's a very fancy way of saying I do a lot of teaching and academic advising. And so I am an advisor for our chemistry and biochemistry majors. I do work very strongly or very closely with the first year chemistry program. So if you have a student taking chemistry 1211, 1212, or 1310, I'm involved at least in some way in all of those courses right now, but I am the primary instructor for all of Chem 1211. We are teaching that in a remote fashion, and just had a really great interaction with my classes this morning about how much I appreciate their interaction with me in the chat and things like that. So I think we're getting a little bit better at that interaction in that remote scenario. So if you have questions about those first year courses, those sorts of things, that's kind of what my area of expertise would be.
Great, thank you, Dr. Shepler. Next is Dr. Ed Greco, academic professional in the School of Physics. Dr. Greco, we're not hearing you.
How about now? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Backup microphone. First lesson we learned in the spring when I moved online. Hi, my name is Dr. Ed Greco in the School of Physics, and I oversee a large chunk of our introductory physics sequence. About 1,100 students, maybe 20% to 30% are first year students. We have about 20 or so graduate students supporting that, and then another 20 or so undergraduate TAs. I also do advising for physics majors, though it's usually pretty rare that we get a physics major at one of these events, but I'll hold out hope that there's at least one person there. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have about how we've moved things online or how we're managing these large enrollment courses in this semester. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I want to maybe kick off the panel. As I mentioned in my introductory remarks, we just hit midterm, so midterm progress report grades came out Monday afternoon. And just to be sure everybody understands what those are, Georgia Tech, any 1,000 or 2,000 level course, the student receives an S or a U, S for satisfactory or a U for unsatisfactory in that course. Like everything, we don't send grades home to parents. It's sent to the students can log in and see them. And it's typically up to the faculty member how they may define that. But generally speaking, an S is a C or better in a course and a U is below that. But again, a faculty member may choose specifically how he or she allocates an S or a U. I know when I've taught before, sometimes I'll give a U just in order to for a grade on the border so that I can nudge a student towards maybe making some improvements. The purpose of giving midterm progress report grades is strictly to give students plenty of notice and time to gauge how they're doing in a course, with the recognition that there's still a long way to go in the semester. So I'd love to hear, from all of the different perspectives that as we're at this midterm point, what are some words of advice that parents may have in those conversations with their students? And I'm going to follow that up just to give a preview of some of the questions that you may also want to speak to the virtual online learning setting that we're in, because we do have a number of questions that are asking about the in-person and the virtual learning setting. So if there's some thoughts around that part of it as well, feel free. And so I'll let whoever on the panel may want to start. Dr. Spencer, I may get you to kick it off just from an advisor and faculty perspective, since you have several hats here.
Yes. Sure, and I also know that I think we forgot to have Dr. Steinbart introduce herself, and so we'll want to.
Shit. I'm so sorry, Dr. Steinbart.
There's a lot of questions about math and math advising here, so maybe we should let her do that first, and then I can jump in. Or if Dr. Steinbart even wants to talk about kind of what's going on with math right now, since so many of our first-year students are taking math classes and getting midterm math feedback, etc. So I'll let her go first.
Good afternoon. I teach math, so I'm in the School of Mathematics. I'm a faculty member there. I'm also the advisor for undergraduate math majors. This semester, I'm teaching Math 1551, Differential Calculus. The course is highly coordinated, as are many of our 1,000 and 2,000 level math classes. By coordinating, meaning there are 5 different lecturers for my class. However, we all are doing the same days for tests and quizzes and so forth, and it's very coordinated. The students have a lot of support. I have lecture twice a week. I have a studio, and the studios are the smaller groups. I have a TA assigned to each of my 4 studios and about 30 students in there. In addition to that help, we have Plus, which is students can go to a plus session related to the class, where a student who has already successfully completed the class will work with the students and just do extra practice problems. In addition, there's the tutoring through the Office of Undergraduate Education, the tutoring and academic support that students have. Plus, of course, there's the office hours. Our TAs are fantastic. So in class, even though there's 120 people in my class, I have the chat open, and I have a TA who manages the chat, so I don't have to try to manage the chat and lecture at the same time. And the lecture is not a traditional one. We're doing more hands-on problems during class, and it's working out really well. And people will speak up and talk. Even though there's 120 people in the class, people are more likely to speak up or get involved in the chat than we were a year ago when we were in a large classroom.
Great, and I can just kind of jump in with some general information right here, and then have other people feed off of that. Yeah, so midterm progress reports were officially due on Monday. We often give some of our faculty a little bit more time to get them in. So all of the midterm grades are not in yet, but they should all be in by close of business today. So if your students don't have all of their feedback yet for their 1,000 and 2,000 level classes, it is coming. Again, these are not things to stress students out or to make them feel bad about. It's to give them feedback so that if they're not where they expected to be at this point, or if they get any kind of surprise feedback, they think they're doing terribly and they got an S, or the vice versa, it's a good time to reach out virtually in most cases, but in some cases in person. They need to actually make sure they know how their faculty and TAs are available this semester. And we do have a lot of variety on campus, which is a little confusing, but definitely something students need to ask about. But they need to definitely check in just to make sure that they know where they are in the class. Additionally, advisors are going to reach out to any first-year student, including our first-year transfer students, who have 2 or more U's. And many of our advisors will reach out to students who have any U's, not just first-year students and not just 2 or more. It depends on the unit. But advisors are doing that just to also help students go through a reflective process. What's working, what's not working, what might they change, what resources might they try. You just be a good reflective sort of bouncing ideas off of kind of conversation, and that, you know, Dr. Shepler and Dr. Steinbart and Dr. Greco all have with their students around this time of the semester. Just this morning we sent out a really nice new easy to use visual tree that helps students kind of go through do I need to work on concepts? If so, then maybe I'll end up with tutoring. Do I actually want to work on getting better organized or motivated? Maybe it's coaching. Am I struggling with feeling overwhelmed? Maybe it's reaching out to care, etc. So that kind of thing. And we can definitely make that this really nice, easy resource available to the parents program too, so that they can share it, because it's a good thing for parents maybe to talk about with their students too, if anyone's feeling like things aren't going as well as they hoped. I know that a couple of questions came in about, you know, face-to-face tutoring. Our tutoring programs for the most part are virtual right now, but if you have a if your student really feels like, gosh, I'd really like to do something face-to-face with someone, I recommend that you actually reach out to the tutoring and academic support office. Their website address is just tutoring.godtech.edu. The director's name is Dr. Green. We can put that in the chat, and it may be possible that we can actually work out a face-to-face session where that will actually be safe and rewarding for everyone. So definitely ask. And I think that's one of the things that students really need to do this fall is be assertive and ask for the resources you need, or sometimes even maybe remind faculty that, like today I'm teaching a history class, I forgot to post something on my module, and I'm like, students, let me know, I forgot, so we can all use a nudge too, etc. I'm going in and teaching my class in person twice a week. Some of my students are coming and doing it with me in person, very safely spaced out. Others are joining me live via Blue Jeans and participating, but I will also say that a lot of students are treating my class like it's a completely remote, asynchronous event, and I have reminded them that they really shouldn't approach their classes that are not set up that way in that kind of method. The more engaged they can be, the more powerful their learning will be. And I think that's a good thing to remind your students about too. I'll stop.
Thanks, Dr. Spencer. And so Dr. Shepler and Dr. Greco, if you could offer some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I can go first. I was reading through the questions there, and I saw one that really resonated with me. It said, regardless of how much I encourage my freshman student to get out of the dorm, he's only going out for takeout, and he hasn't met his roommates. We appreciate the effort at communicating. Is there some way that we can facilitate connections? And I will say that I've noticed that too, that the students, particularly with our freshman physics majors, I'm teaching a GT 1000 class in addition to the regular intro physics courses. And one of them had to come by to pick up a magnet. I'm giving them little projects to do from their dorm or at home. They came by to pick up a magnet, and they were just so happy to be in the physics building. They were like, I actually had a reason to come into the physics building, and this is just fantastic. I'm finally here. And they, sat in my office, socially distanced with mask on, but we chatted for a while, and I really appreciated that, and really reinforced the belief that we do need to help facilitate interactions in a safe way. And so we are thinking about that, how to do that. It's very difficult in my non-GT 1000 courses. Like my GT 1000 course has like 20 physics majors in it. So we can plan to get together in a safe way. My physics class has like 260 people in it. And there's, no space on campus where we can like get together and be socially distanced. And so if I try to do something in a smaller group, it becomes really challenging on how I make that accessible to everyone in the class. And so we kind of, the first half of the semester, we're playing it very safe and wanted to see how the campus responded to students coming back. And now that we're in the second half, our lab courses are listed as hybrid, and we have many small lab rooms in the Clough building. And so we're looking at how we can rotate students in small groups through the lab space in the Clough building. Maybe in chemistry has already started doing that, but yeah, it's something that we think about, we're aware of, and we just overall, we want to make sure that we're being safe with the students. I mean, I enjoy seeing them as much as they enjoy seeing me, probably more so, honestly. Yeah, I don't know if Dr. Shepler has anything to add about chemistry.
Sure, absolutely. So one thing that I can tell you in chemistry is that 2 of the 3 first-year chemistry courses are having labs in a hybrid fashion, and so half of the students come into the lab spaces each week. The particular course that I'm teaching is not being run that way. It's fully remote, and that leads to a very logical question of why that's the case. And to be honest, that's a resources issue. It's when you only have half of the number of students in the lab spaces, you need more physical space and things like that. And so we had to make a tough decision as far as that goes. And we didn't love that decision, but again, our top priority had to be making sure that the students were safe. That's always the top priority in a chemistry lab, and COVID just adds a layer of complexity to that. I agree with Dr. Greco that, I taught in the spring, so I got a little taste of this in the spring. I taught 2 courses over the summer, and now I'm, 7 weeks into the fall. And holy cow, do I miss being in a room with students. So I think we do. I know that it doesn't particularly make a difference to the students to know that we would like to be in a different situation as well, but I think the more community we build around these issues, the better off everybody is. One of the things that I think has been a huge challenge for my students that I think, the more they hear this type of message from different people, it will be helpful, is that it's so, like Dr. Spencer said, it's so important for them. And I know it's hard, but it's really important for them to put effort into engaging in the synchronous experiences that they do have. I think it's really easy to have this, especially my class. One of my classes is at 8:25 in the morning. Yay, chemistry, 8:25 in the morning, right? So I think for a lot of the students, it's easy for them to think, well, she's going to record the session. She's going to work a lot of problems. I use a flipped classroom model, so I'm giving them a lot of lecture content online, and then we come into class, and in the live session, we're working a lot of problems. So they feel like they already have the content, and it's early in the morning, and it's going to be recorded. And so I think it's really easy for them to either opt out, or, I think what's happening with a lot of them is they're there, but they're not really there, because it's so easy to be distracted. It's so easy. In my regular physical classroom spaces, I actually don't let students use laptops to take notes. They can't not be on their computer in class right now. And that's super hard. I'm an official grown-up, and I have a hard time not multitasking during meetings because everything's just right there. I could just peek in at my email. I could just do this. I could just do that. It's so hard for them. But I think the more effort they put into really engaging in those synchronous experiences, the better things will be. The more they challenge themselves to post something in the chat, or to even, little things like in office hours, students don't tend to turn their cameras on, and I do completely understand there may be very important reasons that they're not doing that. But if they are able to do it, now all of a sudden I can see your face and I can see that you're confused, and I can do something different. As opposed to what happens a lot is I'm teaching into a little green dot. I'm not, I can't tell where students are with things. And so I think there's some little things like that don't seem like they would make a big impact for students, but really can make the experience better for both the students and the instructor.
Thank you, Dr. Shepler. Dean Stein, maybe some perspectives from your area, and also there was a question about whether RAs were checking on students and sort of connecting with students in residence life and how that part may be working.
Sure. RAs are supposed to be checking on students. That is a part of their job and responsibilities. If that's not happened, then I think, you can bring it to our attention, and we will, work with that hall director and RA to make sure that they are fulfilling that responsibility. That's an important piece, and that's one of the main reasons we have RAs, is to kind of be aware of what's going on with individual students and on a particular floor and in a building. It is right around this time of the semester that typically they would do what we call wellness checks on students, where they would be checking in, particularly within the first year buildings, and just see how the student is doing, have a conversation. And so, that should be happening very soon. As far as activities, non-academic activities, what students will see appropriately with the right social distancing and mask and stuff is an increase in activities on campus during the month of October. Now that we've gotten through the first 6-7 weeks of the term, we've learned a lot, and we're beginning to open up things more. So this evening, there's actually an improv show in our theater. Students had to register for it just to reserve a seat, because there's limited seating. But that's just one example that will bring a whole group of students into a setting, again, socially distant, for an enjoyable evening. There are 3 home football games during the month of October. Homecoming is this month in October. And there'll be some of the traditional homecoming events like the Mini 500, the freshman cake race. Again, all redone and reorchestrated appropriately. So it won't be exactly how it's always been, but there's been a desire on the Institute and the Rec Club to carry on these traditions that have been in place for generations. So there's a weekly digest that students should receive on a Monday morning that lists all of the different activities that are happening in any given week on campus.
Thank you, Dean Stein. And I'll add an event that we'll put in the chat as well. We're coordinating out of our office twice a week. We're calling them sort of open office hours. They're not technically for courses, but we'll have some faculty and administrators over next to the Clough building. They'll be outside. That'll just be there to chat and answer questions. And so we've opened that up to different people across campus to attend those. And we'll even have some snacks, likely, and individually wrapped snacks to help students hopefully entice them to come over and just get out and say hi. And very informal. And I'll ask Corey, who works with me, to put that link in the chat. And that'll also go out in the newsletter that Dean Stein just referenced that lists various things going on campus. So we'll be including that in next Monday's edition. We'll be doing those all throughout October and November. I want to switch topic just a little bit. There's a couple of questions about spring, and one of the questions is about advising for spring and when that will occur, and particularly with first-year students. Dr. Spencer, do you want to maybe address that briefly and kind of talk a little bit about what that process will look like and how that will work?
Absolutely. So actually now is the perfect time for students to start reaching out to their advisors to schedule time, busy, hectic time right now, to talk about their plans for spring. And actually right now there's time to meet with advisors to do kind of bigger advising, not just like a 10-minute question, can I take this class in the spring? The spring schedule won't be available until right around the 1st of November. And spring registration will begin on November 9th. So we have a lot of time before we have to do that. But most of our, especially our first and second year students, they already know the types of classes or even the exact classes they're going to take probably next semester. They're going to take calculus, they're going to take, Chem 2, etc. But they just don't know exactly when it's going to be offered. But actually right now is a great time for students to go to AdvisorLink, our brand new platform that's actually working very well. Even though we just rolled something out for all 16,000 undergrads, they can actually reach out and make an appointment with their advisor to say, hey, I'd like to talk about spring, or maybe I saw one question about, maybe I should withdraw from a class. That's definitely a conversation you want to have now with an academic advisor so you can make a good informed decision, not a gut reaction. And, maybe if they're taking GT 1000, maybe even talk about their academic planning assignment they're doing, any other concerns. Advisors have a lot of time right now, but if students wait until the spring semester schedule comes out and phase 1 registration is about to start, that's when a lot of advisors say, oh, I have to pretty much do drop-in advising right now. I can just do quick questions. So really the month of October is a great time for an appointment with an advisor. And if you don't know how to make that appointment with the advisor, email your advisor and say, I don't know how to connect with you, and they will show you how to do that. Or reach out to my office, advising.gotech.edu. We will make sure you connect.
I have a comment about reaching out to people. This is Enid Steinbart with mathematics. I am also teaching a GT 1000 class, and some of the things that we've done there to help coordinate the students and help them meet other people is we do these things called breakout rooms. And we also do this in my calculus class, and where maybe 4 or 5 students are sent into a smaller group so that they're working with this smaller group and they've really made friends within that smaller group. So that's one thing, to try to connect with a couple people that way.
Thank you, Dr. Steinberg. Dr. Shepler, Dr. Greco, you want to add to this?
Dr. Steinbart, we do the same in the remote labs. All of our remote lab sessions are synchronized and heavily focused on small groups. And we try to keep the students in the same groups for a couple of, several weeks, usually half of the semester in some cases, so that they can create those connections and things like that. We've also encouraged them to utilize those groups outside of the lab session. To look at post-lab questions and to go over the protocol ahead of time and things of that nature. So we're doing some of the same sorts of things and trying to engage the students with one another as well.
I would say, Dr. Greco again, that if your son or daughter is expressing concern about how to connect, that you ask them to reach out to the course that they want to make connections in, and the instructor can help facilitate that. I've had a few students who are taking the class remotely, and so they've not known how to connect, and I've just literally put them in contact with students or added them. I said, hey, did you know that the students informally created a group me to chat about the class? And I can add you there. And we have this time set up in Teams where students can just work on homework together. So you could try that. The students, we are having lab and recitation, and they do that in small video conference meetings with a graduate student. And so they then can talk to that student's graduate student TA and ask them, hey, keep an eye on this student, make sure that they're participating, and see if you can, if you have like a kind of outspoken student in your lab group, maybe you can connect the two of them. It's just, when you're in a physical large lecture hall, you can just turn to the people sitting next to you. Oh, how did you do on that test? Oh, not so good. You want to meet up in Clough and study? Those informal conversations are harder to do online, but the instructors and the TAs can help facilitate them. So all you have to do is encourage them to reach out, and we can help.
I'll also mention along the topics too of just connecting, our buildings, for example, our Clough Undergraduate Learning Commons is open. The library, we have a beautiful new library buildings that are open. These have socially distanced spaces, coffee shops. Those are open and available, and students can go over there and study safely. They can meet up with other students in the course in a safe way to study too. So if you're hearing feedback regarding being just in their dorm room, please know that our campus and many of these buildings are open, available, and students are using them. As I'll walk through the building as well and see students in Clough, students standing in line to get a coffee at Starbucks. So we have lots of, and then outside there's tents that are set up so students can be outside. Especially now that the weather is cooling off for the fall, and outdoor seating in many areas. So we have a new student center, campus center that's opening. So lots of opportunities to be on campus and connect safely. While we're talking about spring, there's been a few questions about some of the plans for springs. We did announce yesterday that we are making some modifications to our spring calendar, and that we will not be having a typical spring break in the middle like we would normally do, but we're offering 2 days off essentially in the middle of the semester. We are, Dean Stein and I both work on some of the institute committees that are already actively working on our plans for spring and thinking about that. We're currently moving towards a model where we will offer a range of instructional formats, face-to-face courses, remote courses, and hybrid courses. So our academic leadership are actively working on how to define these and thinking about some of the positive trends we're seeing on the health side, but also knowing that there's a lot of uncertainty. Dean Stein, do you want to talk any more about just sort of some of the spring, looking ahead to spring from a campus life perspective, since some of the parents are thinking about that from planning ahead?
Sure. I just want to also update you. I just, as we were talking, I got an update from housing that those check-ins that RAs will be doing will be starting this week and through next week and the week after. So in the next few days and stuff, your student should be approached by the RA. If that doesn't happen, again, you can let us know, all right? But they are committed to doing it, and they will be following up. I want to just first say that, we're getting some really great ideas from many of the faculty and ways and strategies that they are working with students. I wanted to acknowledge, though, because I'm hearing a great deal from families, particularly families of first-year students, that this is not easy for some students. Even these kind of simple strategies that they're offering are not easy, and I want to acknowledge that we know we have some students who really struggle with this. And if you're the parent of one of those students, then you should reach out to us so that we can figure out an appropriate intervention for your student that could help facilitate this, because sometimes it just needs to be facilitated the first time for that student. And see, that happens more naturally in a classroom face-to-face. It's much more complicated in the kind of environment that we're all functioning in right now. So please don't hesitate to do that. Spring term, in relation to campus life, what you'll see is a kind of, again, gradual growing of different opportunities with following all the guidelines. Student organizations are much more interested in creating opportunities and working with the theater and other spaces on campus. The Office of the Arts will be creating some opportunities for students. So students will be offered much more than they have been this semester. And the reason is that we've learned a lot, and we got a great testing program in place, and it's keeping our numbers down considerably. And if we can stay in that space, then we can experiment more and really offer a full array. It's not going to be what it was a year ago, but we're going to try and do the very best we can. I know some students are struggling with the thought, do I stay registered in terms of living, not so much classes, but do I stay in the residence hall or do I go home for spring? That's an individual choice. Honestly, I think you need to discuss it with your son or daughter, and as a family, make that decision of what do you believe is in the best interest. You know, a student can always come, if they're fairly local, they can always come back for an event if they wanted to and stuff. Some students have gone home this semester, but held on to their room with the hope that they will return in January for, you know, a spring semester that'll be different than this one. So.
Thank you, Dean Stein. There are a couple of questions in the chat regarding TAs and interacting with TAs and maybe some challenges there. So I was wondering if any of the three of the faculty that do work closely with TAs might talk about some strategies for how students may engage with TAs, and if they do encounter obstacles, what next steps they should take in the course.
I'd be happy to jump in if that's okay. Sure.
Yes, please.
So we have an army of TAs in chemistry. With all of our undergraduate courses, I think we have about 150 teaching assistants this semester. Those are undergraduates and graduate students. And what I can tell you is that we do work closely with our teaching assistants. Almost every course that employs them has a weekly meeting, and we check in and try to make sure everybody's on the same page. I do think that you know, our teaching assistants are facing many of the same challenges that faculty and students are facing. They're learning to do a job in a different way than they have had to do that job before. And you know, I kind of feel like, wow, I've been doing this for 15 years, and all of a sudden I had to relearn how to do my job based on the new circumstances. And I have some sympathy for our TAs as well. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't appreciate the student perspective, that you know, it's when the person who's trying to teach you is confused. And so what I would say about that is that, you know, approaching interactions with teaching assistants with as much community mindedness as possible is really helpful. If everyone can kind of pitch in and try to help. One of the things I really loved about having in-person office hours when I was able to do that is that students would start helping each other. Maybe the way I was explaining it wasn't quite working, but maybe the way another student could explain it would work. And so encouraging students to try to help the TA out in terms of getting on the same page if that's possible. I think another thing that happens is that I saw some things about, you know, things going unanswered. The TA doesn't really do anything in the virtual session. I think what happens a lot of the time is that students don't come into the session with specific questions. And if they're not asking specific questions, the teaching assistants may assume that they're doing okay. And so they're, you know, well, my students didn't have any questions. So, you know, we didn't talk a whole lot. And so I would encourage students to go in with, you know, as specific a question as they can come up with. I totally understand that sometimes you're too confused to have a very specific question, but even getting a teaching assistant started on a topic is important. If all of those things are not helping, then I strongly encourage students to go to their faculty member. Their faculty members should be having office hours and should be able to get them back on track. My office hours are virtual, but I actually think I've had a little bit of an increase in attendance in them, because I'm finding that students who would not have had the time or the inclination to walk across campus to ask me a quick question will click on the button to come into the virtual session to ask the question. And so really, really encouraging your students to use those professor office hours, I think is really, really very, very important.
Thank you.
I'll chime in. Regarding the TAs, we have an awesome army, again, of TAs that are helping with the math classes. The TAs have office hours in addition to my office hours. They're very flexible. If your student can't make the office hours, they shouldn't just give up on it. They should send a message to either their instructor or their TA and ask, when can I meet? Here are some times that I'm available. Can you meet with me at any of those times? I found that before, when we were live, I did not stay on campus after a certain time because traffic got really bad and it took me a really long time to get home then. But now that it's all virtual, I can have evening office hours. I can have late afternoon office hours, which were not an option before. And also, as Carrie was saying, we have the opportunity to come in just for a quick question and then leave. And it's not taking 20 minutes to walk to the office and back just to answer that one question. So students are more inclined, I think, to actually go to the office hours.
Thank you, Dr. Steinbart and Dr. Shepler. There's several questions in the chat that I will kind of group into the category of mental health concerns related to isolation, students, being in. We talked a little bit about that this fall, but also thinking ahead to spring break, and understanding that takes away a break when we know that students and faculty appreciate that break. And I'll say first that the decision on that was, of course, made with our public health guidance in mind, and really doing everything we can to minimize any opportunity for increasing exposure. And so public health guidance is really our top guiding decision in our leadership making that decision, understanding that there are trade-offs with that. And it may seem early to be making that decision, but we are planning the spring calendar and class schedule right now, and we'll soon be talking about next summer and next fall. So these decisions do have to be made very early in order to make those preparations. And maybe Dean Stein and Dr. Spencer, from your different perspectives, could address some resources available. We've touched on a few, but related to mental health concerns that students may be expressing to parents, and some steps that can be taken along those lines.
Beth, do you want to go first, or do you?
I thought I would probably let you go first, and I can kind of fill in with anything else to add to it. Thanks.
Sure. Okay. So again, I want to kind of remind everyone that the full array of services around mental health are in place. CARE, which is our Center for Assessment and Referral in Education, is fully functional. Now, again, we're in a space that most of it is in remote, but they are reaching out to students, and students are reaching out to them. They're able to meet with a counselor on probably the same day that they need that appointment. And there, I think I want parents to really know, students come into that space for all kinds of reasons. It's not because they're clinically depressed. It may just be that, it's been a bad day. I got a disappointing grade back. I'm feeling lonely and isolated. They can connect with someone, talk to one of the counselors, come up with a strategy and plan. I really, really want to encourage students to take advantage of that. If the counselor assesses that the student could benefit from additional help, then they will make a referral to our counseling center. Okay, but most students really, sometimes what it comes down to is they want to be heard. They want someone to listen to what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and maybe the struggle that they're dealing with. And many times they may not want to tell you because they don't want to overwhelm you as the parent, but if they can talk to a counselor, that helps a great deal. Okay, so keep that in mind. And Dean's appointments also, myself and others, I am willing to have a face-to-face. We have a space that we can have appropriate distance and stuff. A lot of my other deans are doing it remotely and stuff, but we're available too. If a student doesn't want to talk to a counselor and they just want to talk to one of us, they can come in, have a conversation, or we can do it the way we're doing it here, and really make the right referrals. When we listen to a student, what we're listening to is, what does this student need? And sometimes it's a referral back to an advisor, sometimes it's back to their professor, sometimes it's over to the Center for Academic Success, sometimes it's to the counseling center, right? It's kind of meeting the student where his or her need is in the moment, in offering some relief from the distress that they might be feeling.
Sure, and I'll just build on that. I'm going to say some of the exact same things Dean Stein said, but you know, students are feeling maybe just overwhelmed with their academic situation right now, or maybe they're struggling with motivation, and I think that's something that's going to be really important this year, especially like some parents are saying, like, hey, there's not going to be spring break, my student's going to get burnout. Well, I think that's a legitimate thing to worry about. We all struggle with it. We're having your student, reminding your student about academic coaching, which I know Lacey has posted a referral back to the earlier webinar, but that can really be very, very helpful too, because academic coaches give your student individual attention for about an hour-long appointment, or 45 minutes to an hour, where they can really talk about, like, what are my obstacles? Why don't I feel motivated? Why am I feeling burnt out? Why am I not going to class? Or, you know, just again, coming up with strategies to reach their goals, or maybe set some goals, those kinds of things. If an academic coach kind of hears that maybe the student is also struggling with some mental health concerns, etc., that academic coach will make the appropriate referral or have the good conversation with the student also. And then students can also use their academic advisors, again, if they just want to kind of check in with somebody about how they're feeling, if they're feeling isolated, if the semester isn't going the way they thought it would. Advisors are, again, a first line of resources, and again, they are trained to know when it's time to refer students to care or to the dean of students, etc. They work closely with these offices, so students can really start in several different places and have lots of different resources. But I think I can speak for the entire advising, coaching, and academic support community that everybody just wants to be helpful to students this fall. In my class this fall, I've had a couple students reach out to me and just say, you know, I was feeling a little blue this week, or I wasn't paying attention, and I kind of missed this, you know. And I'm as an instructor, I'm willing to work with people who are also reaching out, just being honest about maybe that, you know, keeping up with more things being online is troubling. I can't say that every instructor is going to do that, but again, remind your students just to be honest with people and tell them what they need. I think a lot of us are really willing to work with people because we want students to be happy and healthy and want to be at Georgia Tech. It's really important to us.
Yeah, thank you. I echo that, Dr. Spencer and Dean Stein. I also want to mention regarding the calendar, the spring calendar is largely the same as it has typically been. The difference is the spring break piece, but we're replacing that with 2 days off. But the students do typically start in January, beginning of January. They have MLK Day off, and then we go until mid-March. And our spring break time has always been around that middle March period, that week off. So the spring calendar, and then it will end and conclude at the same time. So the spring calendar is approximately almost, you know, it's very similar to what it normally would be. So I just wanted to make that point. There's a couple of questions about the ideas around flipped classrooms and how that's playing into the time students take to study and be in class, and several things wrapped up in that dimension. And so Dr. Shepler, could you speak a little bit, and then any of the other faculty may want to chime in as well.
Sure, I brought that up, so I'll be happy to address it. So I think someone asked, what is a flipped classroom model? This is something that has been around in education, you know, way before COVID came into the picture, and it's a strategy to employ in classrooms in replace of going into the classroom and giving a lecture. And then relying on students to engage with the material through problem solving on their own. You invert it. And so this can take a lot of different models. The way I personally do it is that I have very short 4 or 5 lecture slide videos over the material. I'm voicing over, I'm writing in, so it's very similar to what they would have seen me do in person. I splice those with me talking. So I give a little introduction to the video, then they go do the video, and then they come out of the video and I talk about it a little bit more. And then to try to engage them with it, I send them to go do a quiz question on that material, very low stakes. They get a couple of attempts at it, not a lot of points. Then we come back, I introduce a new video, they watch a little more. So it's this very back and forth interactive idea to introduce them to all of the material for a given topic. Then in the live session, we focus almost extensively on problem solving. And chemistry is, I'm stealing this from one of our math colleagues, chemistry is a contact sport. You have to, you have to really get in there and engage with the problems and work the problems. And I completely understand the idea that this is less engaging for students, but I was doing this before COVID. And so my personal belief is that there are ways to make it incredibly engaging for the students. And I did get very strong feedback on it during the summer sessions, and we'll continue to work with my students to give them opportunities to give me feedback on the model that I'm using, and also to tweak it as I need to. Part of the reason for doing this is that students do need to be spending a certain amount of time outside of class on the material. Again, with chemistry, they need to be working those problems. And so I'm choosing to structure that outside time by saying, okay, I'm going to have you spend this time doing these things outside. It's very prescribed. There's a very concrete end goal. When you're finished, you're finished. And then we'll come into class and do the problem solving, as opposed to giving the lecture in class and then saying, go work the problems on your own. Often what happens with that is that the problems don't get approached because there wasn't a due date or there weren't points associated with them and things like that. In terms of it taking more time, again, I try to be mindful of the amount of time that it takes, but I do think that the students need to be spending some time outside of class. And I'm just trying to be very prescriptive in what I do with that. So again, there are a lot of different ways to approach this, but there were many of us who were doing this before COVID came into play. So the other thing that I would kind of encourage folks to keep in mind is that people are trying to be very accommodating of a broad array of students. I know for example, because my course is completely remote, I have a pretty good number of students, maybe 15 to 20, who are international and who are 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 hours different than I am. And so this is a way that makes the material very accessible to them as well, without having them to be online at 4 o'clock in the morning and some things like that. So some of those things, we also have some students who aren't in different time zones, but their connectivity is not great. And so, when I'm trying to lecture live, I may be glitching in and out or freezing. And this makes sure that they can get that information a little bit more accessibly as well. So there's some of those things playing a role in decisions in terms of how to approach these things as well. But nothing is one size fits all. And I definitely acknowledge that, there's no way pre-COVID or in COVID that my approach in the classroom is going to be the best fit for every one of my students. And we just kind of have to navigate that a little bit.
Thank you, Dr. Shepler. Dr. Greco?
Yeah, I was going to add that it's not all discouraging. So we just gave the midterm progress reports, and I gave fewer unsatisfactories for my Physics 1 students this semester than I have in a few years. And they just are doing really well. And it could be we've changed up how we're doing a lot of the content. It's more flipped, which is supported by education research to be have deeper learning with longer retention. Or it could just be, Georgia Tech students keep getting smarter every year. But it's not all bad news. It is stressful because things are different, and all of us, professors included, develop skillful coping mechanisms. And so when things change a little bit, we might not know right away how to skillfully cope with the extra stress, but I feel like we're figuring it out and we're adapting, and we just try to be flexible. I tell all of my TAs to be as flexible as we can, but with clear boundaries about expectations. And we just move forward. And I think I'm really hopeful and surprised at how well the students are doing and just thriving at least in my introductory physics courses. So not all bad news, not all stressful doom and gloom.
Thank you, Dr.
I'll
Breakout.
chime in.
Yep.
I'll chime in as well. This is Enid Steinbart from mathematics. One of the things that we did in the School of Math, we were encouraged as faculty members in the School of Math to send out a short survey, 3 questions, asking the students what's working, what's not working, and what's one thing that we could change. And the feedback we got was wonderful. It wasn't all the same. People had different ideas, but hearing that feedback and hearing also what was working was really important. We meet and we share the ideas with other faculty members. So we're learning all the time what's working, what's not working. Some of this is on testing, some of this is on content delivery and making the virtual classroom work. So it's an evolving process and we're making progress.
We are getting to the end of our hour together. I'll also mention that we have recently wrapped up some extensive surveying of students and doing some listening sessions with students and faculty to get direct feedback from how things are going. And we're using that feedback from students and from faculty in our planning for how we will approach spring, contingent on, of course, the health situation and how things go. But we're actively seeking that input and using it in our administration's planning. I want to thank all of the panelists for joining us this afternoon. You saw all our names on the title slide, and of course the Parent Program Office can help you connect with any of us should you want to follow up. Happy to do that. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Thank you for having your students with us. We are all happy to have them, happy to have you as part of our community, and looking forward to finishing fall successfully and moving on to the next phase of this. Thank you very much.
Yes, and I'd like to once again just thank all of our panelists for joining us here today. Parents and family members, if you would like to view the recording of this webinar today, we know that we've had a lot of great information shared with us today. A recording will be available within the next 24 hours on our website, parents.gatech.edu. If you go under the Stay Connected tab, under virtual recordings, you'll be able to access this recording as well as previous recordings as well. So far, we've done over 12 to 15 webinars thus far this semester from various offices across the campus, just touching on different topics that you have already asked about. So it's a great way to kind of get connected and just watch in your spare time on the way home from work or on your lunch break and things of that sort, or on the weekends. So please, 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 and I'll post a link in a second. However, I would encourage you to join us tomorrow as well at 3 p.m. We will be joined by some more of our colleagues, just focusing on another topic for our webinar series. Tomorrow, we are focusing on Georgia Tech Lorraine, and so we will have several of our colleagues talking about that as well, and what Georgia Tech Lorraine and studying abroad looks like in that space. And so without further ado, I'd like to just thank all our panelists again, and just hopefully you all have a great rest of the week, and we'll hopefully see you tomorrow. Thank you so much.